What's a virtual machine? A virtual machine is a process which is running within the hypervisor. And the difference between a normal process and the virtual machine process is that the virtual machine processes are actually isolated processes which are running within the hypervisor. The other thing that it has is direct control over the hardware. So when you define a VM, so for example, when you say a VM actually has about 4 CPUs, 8 GB RAM, 100 GB disk and all that, the hypervisor doesn't actually allocate the resources on the fly. What it does is it marks the resources for the virtual machine to actually use. So in other words, it keeps in mind that there is entitlement for the virtual machine processes to use the resources, but it doesn't actually provision them on the fly. And this allows the resources to be used by other virtual machines which needs the resources. And that gives us the principle of oversubscription, wherein you can overutilize resources which is present in the host OS, or rather the physical hardware, but which is not actually in use by the virtual machines themselves. The next stage comes in terms of CPU virtualization. So in CPU virtualization, if you look at modern hardware, in that case, the OS works in something called a ring 0, which is a privileged mode. And then you have the virtual machines and the other processes which are running in ring 3, which is unprivileged. But then what happens if the virtual machine actually needs access to the kernel and to the physical hardware? In this case, there is something interesting happen depending upon the hardware which you're using. So for example, if you're using Intel, the machine can make use of something called Intel VTX. If you're using AMD, it's actually called AMD V within the hypervisor context. And because all of these instances are isolated between one another, you can also have like a memory. You can also have memory page tables, etc. You can also have storage, SRO, IV, etc. technologies. You can have parallel virtualization technologies, etc. What this allows you to do is it allows you to use native KVM and install your guest operating system within the context of each of these processes. So in other words, because these processes are isolated from one another, a crash in one of the systems machine will not cause a cascading effect or a cascading crash on the other virtual machines which are there on my cluster. Now, this short form video is not a very great way in discussing what virtual machines actually are and the technologies behind them. What we will do is remain subscribed to this channel, and I will actually be putting out next videos discussing virtual machines in details, containers, storage, IO, etc. So see you on the next one. Thank you.